It's been 7 years in the making. Every single upcoming indie games video you've seen from that time has had Silksong listed as one of the most anticipated releases. It's been almost every year. And to everyone's surprise, out of nowhere, it's finally here.
Get the!
Hollow Knight Silksong released on September 4th, 2025, and I cleared my entire schedule just to grind it out day one. This is my journey through the eerie, beautiful, and sometimes frustrating world of Hollow Knight Silksong. The game opens with Hornet trapped in a cage, carried far away from the Hollow Nest toward a massive palace. On a bridge, she regains some of her power and breaks free, and plunges into the abyss. She wakes up in the depths of the kingdom of Pharloom, and that's where the journey begins. Now, if you're like me, and it's been almost a decade since you played Hollow Knight, you might feel a little lost. I definitely was a little lost. So here's a quick refresher. Hornet comes from Hollow Nest, the fallen kingdom from the first game. She's the daughter of the Pale King, which makes her Hollow Knight's half-sister. At the end of Hollow Knight 1, Hornet's fate wasn't very clear. Silksong picks up right after those events. What you need to know from Hollow Knight 1, one of the more important parts of the lore, is the Void. The Void is a primordial substance, and the Pale King used the Void to create vessels. Now, there's a lot more to this, but basically you need to know the Void was used to create vessels, and the Pale King is Hornet's dad. Back to Silksong. Once I hit Pharloom's depths, it didn't take long for me to get back into the groove of a Metroidvania. I fought some enemies, met a few NPCs. The standouts were the Chapel Maiden, a wise old woman who was going to guide me through the story, and a big caravan of fleas, and Shakara, the map maker. Oh, and I almost forgot, the Bell Beast, my trusty fast travel mount. I really like the fast travel in this game. It looks really cool. Now, the flea caravan you meet at the start of the game is missing a ton of their flock, and one of the side quests is to find all the fleas that they're missing. Basically, it's going to take you around the whole map, and you've got to scour every single corner of it to find them. And I did it. It was hell, but we'll get to that later. Story-wise, Act 1 doesn't give you a whole lot. Pharloom is run by a religious order, and they're the ones who captured Hornet. Most bugs you meet in the lower areas are on pilgrimages to the Citadel. Structurally, the kingdom is split into two halves, Lower Pharloom and the Citadel, and most of the game takes place down below, in Lower Pharloom. Now, there are a few major points that stood out to me in Act 1. The overall design, there's this prison area called the Slab, and the final boss of Act 1. She was insane. I loved it. It was one of my favorite boss fights in the whole game. You'll see why in this beautiful clip that I recorded. First of all, the movement and art and general gameplay were amazing. The game really does look and feel just perfect. It took me a second to get back into the groove of a Metroidvania / Souls-like, so the first few bosses were actually pretty challenging. I died a couple times. A good handful of times, actually. But after getting into the groove, most bosses in Act 1 weren't that tough. You know, I'd probably die 3 or 4 times to each boss. Sometimes I'd beat him first try or even in 2 times. But after you get into the Metroidvania groove, you know, you get into the zone, you kind of get going. The first bosses, they're perfect. I felt like the first bosses were perfect for Act 1 bosses. The map here is also massive. There's so many areas that need to be unlocked by acquiring different moves and abilities. It was overwhelming in the best way possible. Also, I do want to point out that the art in this game, it's just amazing. It's so satisfying to look at. It's kind of simple, but also complex in the best way possible. I don't know how to describe it. The artist who did this, fantastic, chef's kiss. Now, I want to focus on this place called the Slab. As I was exploring this massive map, out of nowhere, a special looking bug attacked me. I've never seen this guy before. I went to go attack him. I was like, oh, a new enemy. I went to go attack him. He spit on me, and he threw me into the little cell, and he took me to an area that was completely undiscovered for me. I thought this was amazing. It happened so organically. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just walking around. I think I kept dying to a boss. Then out of nowhere, this guy spits at me, throws me in a cage. Oh, it was a great addition to the game. It was so organic and just randomly happened to me. And it took me by surprise in the best way possible. In this prison called the Slab, Hornet is stripped of her weapons and her clothes. Kind of weird, but half the time you're walking around the Slab, you are butt naked. And you have to break out of this prison with no weapon, no clothes, just your little feet on the ground. This point of the game was a lot of fun because it gave life to the world you were exploring. It reminded you that the Order of Bugs is hunting you. You are not safe wandering around this world. Eventually, Hornet does break out of this prison after battling her way through mobs of enemies and having to fight a mini-boss, and you had to sneak around when you're naked. like going behind enemies, like kind of jumping around enemies, fist fighting enemies without your little needle. It was a cool segment. Eventually you do get your clothes and weapon back, but overall, this really surprised me straight out of the gate in Act 1. I enjoyed this a lot. It was like a great little addition to the game. And after breaking free, I found a new town called Belhart, and spent the next few hours grinding some side quests. Thankfully, the side quests are pretty straightforward. Each town has a quest board, and you just grab the side quests as you go. It's pretty simple. They tell you where to go. Honestly, it's a lifesaver because you are wandering constantly around this map, and I really like that they give you a little bit of direction in the side quests. But from here, it was back to exploring. Doing more side quests, fighting more random bosses, and slowly piecing together the map bit by bit. Making sure to poke my head in every possible corner. That eventually led me to the blasted steps. At the top, I found the Grand Gate, and this is where the game really cranks it up. The first part of the game, I was doing fine. I was just exploring all the areas. The bosses weren't that hard. The bosses were a little difficult. You know, I had some trouble with some of them, but none of them really stood out, you know. It was just a little tough at first. I had to get my bearings, but the blasted steps, and when you get up to that Grand Gate, whew, it takes a little bit of a turn, because waiting for me there was the judge, and she absolutely annihilated me. That fight felt like I was Kenpachi versus Unohana. She didn't just beat me. She trained me. She built me up from nothing. She broke me down. It was a long fight, and it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. And so lucky. I'm so happy I was recording this because we fought for so long. And then finally, when I finally beat her, she does this to me. Did it. Boom. Suck on my judge. Suck my little insect. No! No! Which is hilarious. And just grinded my gears. Especially after an hour of banging my head against this fight. But eventually, I was able to get back and beat her again. Beating the judge opened a gate to the Citadel, which meant it was time for Act 2. Act 2 is where the game takes a major tonal shift. There's no more gross caves or lava-filled rooms. Well, maybe some lava-filled rooms. But now you're wandering through a city of feels like metal. There's a lot of clanking going on. At first glance, it looked fancy. Fine tables, nice decor, you know, all the works, the fixings of a nice royal palace. But everything was abandoned, lifeless, and it felt like a metal ghost town. The only things moving were corpses of dead bugs, puppeted by these strings that kept falling from the sky. It was a pretty creepy place. And the very first enemy waiting for you in the Citadel is none other than that thick-thighed little bombshell herself, Lace. She shows up again, gives us this smug little speech about how Hornet is nothing compared to the god at the top of the Citadel, and Hornet replies back with one of the coolest lines in the game, probably the coolest line in the game, and she says, "I've found those who claim themselves a god can rarely match the title." That's pretty cool. I spent some time exploring the Citadel, and eventually I picked up a quest that required me to beat 3 bosses and piece together a song that unlocked the door leading to the Act 2 final boss. But before doing all that, I decided that I should go back and clean up everything I missed in Act 1. I wanted to go back down to Lower Pharloom. I thought it'd be quick at first. I didn't look at any maps or do any tutorials up to this point or any like guides or anything like that. So at this point in the game, I decided, you know what? I'll look up mapgenie.com and I'll look up their Silksong map and look at an interactive map. I realized at this point I had barely touched the game. My explored map was so much smaller than the actual map that was in the full game. So I set aside some time and I started to unlock more of this map in Act 1. And to my surprise, I didn't even know this, but you do need to clear all of Act 1's map, or at least most of Act 1's map to actually progress in Act 2. I actually heard that from a source later on because you needed the double jump ability, and I just kind of got that naturally, just kind of trying to explore all of the map as I could. And this is actually where the game started to crank up in difficulty. 2 bosses in particular in this huge map really made me absolutely frustrated. And I'm pretty sure both of them were optional. The first one was the Savage Beastfly, a side quest boss from Belhart. On paper, it's simple. We fought the boss before. It's the Beastfly. But in the Savage Beastfly side quest, he comes with these little Oh, just the most annoying little fly minions you could ever see ever. They shoot lava. The lava sticks to the surface you're trying to stand on. The platform, they're standing on these lava platforms who just fall. It's the worst. It's such an easy fight, but man, do the ads that are in the fight just make it so frustrating. After about an hour of just fighting this boss, running back, fighting the boss, running back, fighting the boss, I finally beat it, which is the first feeling I got of a Souls-like in the game. Besides the Act 1 ending boss, I was like, okay, now we're in a hard Metroidvania Souls-like type game, which got me frustrated, but also a little excited. I don't like mob or ad boss fights, so it's a little frustrating, but you know, we were in a Metroidvania Souls-like. You should be a little frustrated. But after that boss, the game threw me into the east side of the map. And now, this is where the game takes a very hard turn into just the most annoying, frustrating part of the game, which I want to attend. I see everyone talking about this part of the game. It's Sinner's Road, BileWater, and the Putrid Docks. These areas of the map are extremely frustrating and hard because in the waters of these maps are little bugs, little maggots that eat away at your silk. And when that happens, it makes it so you can't heal. And the maps are very long and very annoying, and you take little damages from the mobs throughout each map, and when you can't heal, it makes the game so much harder, and it's so much more time-consuming and just brutally frustrating. It's not even that, like, difficulty-wise, it's not that hard, it's just frustrating because you're taking random damage from mobs that you can just kill pretty easily, but because they keep chipping away at your damage, you can't heal it back up. I mean, because you don't know the map, you probably stepped in some goop or you're trying to explore the map. It's just awful. And I see a lot of people on the forums when I was looking through these. Everyone was just raging at this one boss in BileWater. It was easily the most annoying boss to fight. I thought I took 3 hours to fight this boss, and it felt like it. But when I look back at my footage, it actually only took me like an hour and a half. It was Groll the Great. And he's not that hard. He's actually pretty easy of a boss. The thing people are getting frustrated with is when you die, you get sent back to the bench and you have to run all the way back through this terrible, super hard area of the map. And not only do you have to run all the way back, but when you finally reach the boss, you have to go through a series of mob fights before you can even spawn the boss. And it's just awful. This is easily the turning point in the game. This is like, okay, now the game is extremely hard and it's going to be very frustrating. Or so I thought. Honestly, after Groll, Act 2 kind of smoothed out a bit. I was out of the hardest areas in the game. I was away from these maggot-infested waters. I was really on edge at this point in the game because I thought it was going to get super hard. And then I made it to Mount Fae, and Mount Fae was pretty hard. It's the ice place in the game where you get double jump and you got to stay out of the cold. It actually gave me a run for my money. Now, it was nothing compared to BileWater, but it was actually a pretty hard area, a pretty good area. I like the way this area was designed. It actually had me dying a few times, and the platforming was tight and hard. But then we get to one of the hardest bosses in the game. Probably the third hardest boss in my opinion, and it's the first Sinner. And I just kind of stumbled upon this, kind of looking at the interactive map and clicking through all the check marks, just trying to get everything checked off. And I found this first Sinner in a jail cell. Completely optional boss, but the fight was wild. You have to go so much faster than any other boss. This boss attacks fast, probably the fastest attacking boss in the game, especially when I look back at the footage. The first Sinner attacks fast. I'm sure this will be on people's hardest boss list for sure. But eventually, I got a good rhythm, and I feel like I got really lucky and I was able to defeat him pretty quickly. It only took me around an hour, but already, I mean, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. I haven't really checked the time on this footage. I just know they were a really hard boss, and it really got you in a different kind of flow in the game. Like the pacing of the game felt much faster when you're fighting that first Sinner. You have to run back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Most of the time, I don't even use my dash attack. For the first Sinner, that was almost all my damage I used, just the dash attack. It was a good fight. And then after clearing all the side stuff, which took me a long time, probably the majority of the game was just clearing all the side stuff in Act 1, which should be. It's a Metroidvania. I want to explore every part of the map. I finally decided to head back and do the Act 2 final mission, which is to clear these 3 missions, fight these 3 bosses, and gather this song that's going to take me up to the Citadel's top so I can fight the main boss of the Citadel. Compared to the first Sinner, now I'm coming hot off the first Sinner. So the next 3 bosses were pretty easy. Compared to the first Sinner, the next 2 bosses, I don't even really remember, to be honest with you. Because there's 3 different bosses you got to fight before you get to the end of Act 2. I'll be honest, I don't remember that much. I had to look back at my footage, and they're just 2 random bosses that I kind of beat first try. Not that big a deal. But one of the harder bosses before Act 2 ending is Trobbio. I saw on a bunch of Reddit forums that he was, like, people were saying he's the hardest boss in the game. And so I was a little worried. I got in the zone. I was ready for a hard boss. I just came out the first Sinner. I was ready to fight Trobbio, and maybe I got lucky. I beat him within 10 minutes. I think I just got really lucky with like the turn order and the way I was playing already. And I just came out the first Sinner boss. But yeah, Act 2 kind of breezed through. And then after I fought Trobbio, you can do them in any order. I just fought Trobbio last. You go up to the end of Act 2, take an elevator up. And before the elevator reaches the top, you fight your arch nemesis, Lace. And she was actually pretty hard. I felt like she's not as hard as Trobbio, but I lost to her like maybe once or twice. She was a good boss. I thought she was good. I liked Lace a lot in this story. Lace is like your rival, and she's on the religious order. She's kind of like, almost like a sisterly bond kind of way. I don't know if they're sisters fully, but it just feels like that in a certain way. But after this fighting Lace at the end of Act 2, she actually acknowledges us. And she lets us know that she understands that we're strong, we're a warrior, and we deserve to be here, which is very nice for the story-wise. I enjoyed this about Lace. I think Lace is the best written character in the game. I really like Lace a lot. And after fighting Lace, it came to the final boss of Act 2. And I was terrified. I was so scared because of what Hollow Knight 1 did to me. I had to mentally prepare myself. I was ready to sink a few hours into this. I cleared my schedule. I was like, okay, I need at least 3 hours for this final boss fight of Act 2, because I thought Act 2 was the end. I kind of went up to beat him first try. After beating her, we kind of just took her power. And then all of a sudden the credits just rolled. I kind of just sat there and was like, wait, was that it? I kind of just did it first try. Luckily, turns out it was not it. After checking some forums, I learned that there was a secret Act 3. All you had to do was complete a certain side quest. And I had to fight the final boss again. The side quest and fighting the boss again was actually really easy. I just did it first try again. And since I already explored the whole map, doing the side quest is pretty simple. So I kind of did that, wrapped that up, captured her. And after that, a much more important cutscene played, where instead of us absorbing the queen's power, we trap her in this trap of this black void, and she starts sinking in. As she's sinking into the void, Lace jumps up, stabs the queen, and locks her going deeper into the abyss. Now, at this point in the story, I didn't really know why Lace did this. It seemed like she was on the side of the queen the whole time, but she had her reasons, and everything's going to come together in Act 3. Now, after the queen sinks into the abyss, the whole world starts shaking, and everything starts getting destroyed. And her threads that she was using to control the dead bodies of the bugs that we were fighting this whole entire time actually turned into darkness threads, and she was infusing the power of the abyss into her minions. Remember before at the beginning when I said it was important to know what Hollow Knight 1 was about? Well, this is where it ties all in. Hollow Knight 1 was about the void, and now the queen is sucked into the void and harnessing that power of the void to infuse it into the minions. Just like in Silksong 1, how the void was controlling the enemies in that game, she's using the void to control the enemies in this game, which made them so much more powerful and tanky and aggressive. Now on to Act 3. This is where the game turned, both for the good and for the bad. We'll go with the good first. There's so much to do in Act 3. The map really opens up. There's a bunch of different little pockets of the map you can now explore. There are a ton new different side quests, and the story really gets more straightforward here. Up until now, the storyline has been very vague. It's been told through dialogue, told through small clues and hints as to what's going on in the story. And honestly, since there's so much side stuff, it was really hard to keep track of what the general story was. I honestly never fully understood why Hornet wanted to kill the queen at the top of the Citadel, other than they tried to capture her once, so she was going to get her revenge by slaughtering their entire family. I think that's the storyline at the start, which, you know, don't mess with Hornet, because she will kill your whole family if you try to capture her. But other than that, there's a lot of really vague storytelling, and Act 3 is really where everything comes together. So this isn't some optional epilogue. I thought it was going to be an optional thing with like a few bosses. This is very mandatory. This is where actually the bulk of the storytelling actually comes in. Now onto the bad. The game pulled one of my least favorite difficulty tricks in Act 3, and they basically made enemies tankier and just more health and a little bit harder hitting. well, it's not a little bit, a lot harder hitting. They gave every enemy 3 new moves, and they made every enemy stronger. And they just were so tanky. It took a long time to beat one enemy, and there's a lot of enemies around the map. It took me probably about a minute or 2 minutes to beat one enemy, and they were harder because they had projectiles, and it's really hard to deal with projectiles in this game. But it just, wow. It was just awful to even get to one point to another on the map because the enemies, you weren't able to kill them. I just wasn't strong enough. And I was almost about to quit at this part because I wasn't even fighting bosses anymore. I felt like the start of Act 3, the first like 4 or 5 hours, or maybe even 6 hours, it wasn't a single boss I fought. I was just literally getting one point to another, and the enemies were so tanked up, I could barely even get through. And it was frustrating, and I made a huge mistake. I didn't collect all the fleas in the game, which is very important, until Act 3. This was a huge mistake, because you have to get the fleas from different points in the map, and you're forced to fight mobs of enemies. And in Act 3, if you wait, the enemies are extremely strong. You can barely even see the screen when all of the enemies are on screen in Act 3. And it was just awful. I needed to get my weapon stronger, and 2 quests did that. 1, collect all the fleas, which was already annoying because I had to clear all the enemies. And 2, the hardest part in the game, the thing that took me the longest in the game, I look back at my recording, this took me 3 to 4 hours to do. A courier mission that was mandatory if you wanted the upgrade, to run across the whole map and basically not get hit once. And I could have done this in Act 2, and I didn't. I didn't know it existed in Act 2. And now I'm kicking myself here in Act 3 because all the enemies are super strong and it's very hard. It took me 4 hours to do, and honestly, I did not like the courier mission at all. After doing that courier mission, I got the upgrade, which made me feel stronger, which the enemies are less tanky. And then after collecting the fleas, I was also able to get an upgrade. Now, there was one mission with the fleas that was just so crazy hard. And it actually, in hindsight, if I wasn't so frustrated at the start of Act 3, in hindsight, I would actually like this a lot. It was a juggling minigame where you had to juggle fleas above your head. And the games were really good. The mini games were really good. I was just so frustrated at that point. The juggling game probably took me like an hour to beat, which is more time I spent on that juggling than most of the bosses in the game. Act 3 is definitely the best part about the game because you get to fight bosses that actually matter. Before, it kind of felt like the bosses you were finding around the map, especially when you're doing optional stuff, and if you're not looking at a guide, like I wasn't looking at a guide, I was just kind of walking around and bosses would just appear out of nowhere and start fighting me. I didn't really understand why, but in Act 3, every boss seems to have a backstory. Like in Act 3, you have to fight a ton of different new bosses, and these bosses all tie into the story. Lace and her mother have fallen into the void. There's bosses that you need to fight to get enough power to enter the void to take down the Silk Mother from inside the void to save the world completely. And those bosses you fight are tied to the ancient history of the land, which is really cool. You play a different song for each boss, and you like travel back in the past to fight them and get their powers. The first meaningful story connected boss was the coral boss, the Crust King Khann, which honestly, easily my favorite design in the game. I thought he was really cool, and his boss fight was really good. You had to fight a tower of minions before you got to fight him, and it was really cool. It was a great fight. I got really lucky with the fight. I was able to dodge his moves pretty easily, but he's really tanky. The fight took a long time. He was a great looking character overall, and with a cool backstory of just being a leader of an army. The next boss you fight is the plant boss, Nylith, which also very well designed boss. This is a boss where they stick onto the wall and the floor drops out below you, so you can't touch the ground. So basically you're using your double jump, your dash, and kind of bouncing off the boss because the ground is basically lava. The ground is thorns, so you can't touch the ground during the whole boss fight. Really good boss fight. I liked it a lot. And then finally, we have the hardest boss in the game. And I'm really glad I did these bosses in this order, by the way. This was pure luck. But the hardest boss in the game, SkarrSinger Karmelita, the Queen of the Ants. Miss Karmelita just destroyed me. That queen just took me down. She was dancing on me. She was throwing her little things on me. This boss fight took me a long time, and there's no run back. It was like perfectly designed boss. Moves were perfect, hard to read, quick movements. Everything was beautiful. You really had to lock in and really watch her movements and kind of predict what she's doing. And it was like this chess match of just watching her go back and forth, dancing across the stage as she's destroying you, and you're just dying over and over again. Oh my God, I loved it. She was my favorite fight in the game. I loved her fighting her the most. And she really brought together Act 3. At this point in Act 3, I was like, wow, I'm glad I went to Act 3 because this is it. This is my favorite part of the game for sure. And then after beating those bosses, you go to the final fight. And now here's me thinking like, oh, the Act 2 final fight was easy. I was so wrong. That Act 3 final boss was just, oh my God. It was just perfect. Honestly, the 4 bosses you fight at the end in Act 3 really made me like this game a lot more than I would have if I didn't do Act 3. It was a perfect perfection, chef's kiss. The story all came together. You go down in the abyss and you fight Lace for the very last time. But this time, since Lace sacrificed herself to push the queen down into the abyss, which honestly, I'm still a little confused about why she did in the first place, but you fight this dark version of Lace, who's covered in the void, and she is so powerful. Oh my gosh, I had such a good time with this fight. This fight took me, I didn't look at my recording for this one, but it probably took me an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe even 3. It took me a long time because there's like 3 different phases to this fight. It's a great fight because you've been fighting Lace the whole time, and each time you fight Lace, she has very basic moveset the first time you fight her. Then she has a little bit more of a moveset the next time you fight her. She still has her same moves, so it's like you fought her, it's like the second time fighting her, but she has more moves onto her moves that you already fought her with. And then this final time you fight her, she has just powers that make you so you can't heal. She has the same move she's been using the whole time, so you kind of know what's going on. It feels like she's a character in the story, but she has new void style moves that she's using against you. She has 3 different phases. She's faster. You have to react faster. Everything's happening here. You got all your moves. It's really a battle of the Titans, and it's just a thick little thread wielding insect versus Hornet herself. And it truly is a great, very satisfying final battle. I really enjoyed myself after you beat Lace in a most satisfying battle to end a great Metroidvania. You get a story scene that ties first Hollow Knight into Silksong. It leads into a story that's getting much bigger with the both of them coming together and kind of finding out that their enemies are actually the same. And we get a little bit, there's no dialogue in these cutscenes, so there's a lot to assume, but it looks like it sets up the next game. Lace gets saved, so there's another character being added to the story, which Lace is a really cool character. I like the way they set her up. She actually had a lot of dialogue in the game, and all of it just comes together beautifully, and I enjoyed my time a lot with this one. There are a few things that I think I could have paid attention to the story a little bit more and kind of got a little bit more, like the Grand Silk Mother, the leader of the Citadel. She didn't really talk that much. I didn't really know what she was doing. You know, she was kind of there and we kind of slaughtered her. Don't really know why. We had more interactions with Lace, which is really, really good. Overall, the game was fantastic. This was way better than I expected, honestly. I thought so much hype was going to be built up over the years that it was just going to fall flat. But it exceeded my expectations. You know, I think, honestly, there's a rubber band effect with me. I had high expectations like 2 years out when it was announced. But after like the 5th or 6th year that kept on getting announced, I was like, you know, this game's probably gonna be awful. So I kind of had a rubber band effect where it definitely exceeded my expectations. Sure, there were some frustrating moments, like the runbacks in the game were really long, and the courier mission sucks, and the tanky enemy sucked. But the boss design, beautiful, perfect. Especially the Act 3 bosses. There's a lot of bosses that I left out of this video just because the video would be way too long. There's so many bosses in the game, it's crazy. But each one was challenging and it was really rewarding, and I think this is definitely a Metroidvania and Souls-like player's wet dream. I enjoyed myself a ton. That being said, the story was a little weak in the first 2 acts, but I think if I looked around and really talked to the NPCs a little bit more and kind of got their story and kind of pieced it all together myself, maybe like a Pepe Silva kind of style, I think I would have got more of it. But just the upfront story, the story it tells you in the cutscenes, a little vague. A little too vague for my blood, but Act 3 really pulled it together for me. I've seen a mix of reviews online, some good, some bad, and honestly, I think most Metroidvania fans will have a blast playing Silksong. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I enjoyed this game. Thanks for coming with me through the game. I'm Toad Knight, and I'll see you in the next one.